So greetings. Here we are, it's the second class of Life as Our Teacher. And we're going to be especially talking about the chapter that you might have looked at called Finding Freedom in Limitation. So we've said many times that it's not the goal of the Sufi that we represent, or the way that we see things, that we try to get out of manifestation and just kind of roll everything back to being up in heaven and just happy and not really doing anything, playing our harps maybe. And we realize that we have a manifestation and there should be a reason. There's a reason for having it. We are manifest beings. So we are going to look at it from the point of view of what we called before the human divine, that we are human and divine. And in having that marriage, really, between the two, and if you look at our the book that we've written, which is about the human divine, we put a little asterisk in the middle. So we're going human, something or other, divine. And really that little something or other is the place that we hope that we're living in, is between these two. And sometimes on one side, loving the other, or on one side, loving the other. But really the goal is to be getting merge, I should say an infiltration both ways. We don't want them to completely merge. We would like to have this beautiful creation, and we know a lot is coming from that.
Yes, and we call this a state of relational unity, and this applies to both our connection with our human divine aspects, but also the way that we relate to anything else, which could be other people, something in nature, where we still maintain our identity. We don't disappear, but we're no longer in a dualistic, separated state of experiencing, which is the typical state that we go around in. We feel like we're separate from what's going on in the world, and generally most people feel separated from what they think of as the divine or the transcendent. So this is a different way of thinking. Even Arabi describes this as bi-unity, bi-unity, that we are a human divine being, neither solely human, neither solely divine. And also, as I mentioned before, he has this paradoxical way of talking about this, that neither side, neither the human nor the divine, can even exist without the other side. And neither side has any meaningfulness except for its relationship with the other side. So in this series of classes, as Diane mentioned, we're talking about life as our teacher. So everything that we're describing is a way of deepening what can happen from the realization and the experience of life as our teacher, and what are ways that we can go about being in relationship with our experiences that help us to open up to even more rather than constrict to a separated, limited state of being.
So how is that we can live in this way? So that's what we're really doing. The subtitle of this class is The Nuts and Bolts of Spirituality. Those are things you can hold on to. Otherwise, some of these ideas are like, well, I don't know, I'm getting close to that, or I had that happen to me once. But when we wake up in the morning, we might not have anything we can kind of hold on to. So we're going to give you some things that will be like that. I should say, though, that we're also going to be talking about you as a being, what it is that you are developing into, and that'll help with kind of guiding that process. So one of the things to look for in this transformation that we're going to be going through is the idea of the barzakh. Now there is a term that's probably floating around for you. I'm going to anchor that, okay, to what? It's the meeting place. The meeting place, as we were saying before, that little asterisk between the divine and the human. But it's also somewhere that we live I think if you read the chapter, it's talked about that we think that we're living in the manifest world, and that everything's separated, and we have all this time is over here, but we really are living in this place that infuses everything. Or you could say that it is part of the intersection of everything. So that when you feel someone else's love, or when you feel you have contributed to the love of someone else, and even every action that you perform, everything that you do is recorded in this place. Some people would call that, what do people call that recording?
Akashic record.
Akashic record. But it's really a part of this intersection of all these things. So let me give you a little story about that. I was thinking about it, and I was out in my garden, and I've told you different garden stories before, but here's another one. So I gave my roses fertilizer, thinking of the action. Oh look, good. I gave my roses fertilizer. Okay, it has been a while. They needed it, I'm sure. But when I was doing it, I was thinking of the action of feeding everything. Okay, see the difference here? Instead of just giving it to the roses, and maybe I'm tired and I'm, thinking about, well, I'm really focusing. I would say this is using your imagination in a really good way. Imagining that you're feeding all of existence. So that when I'm doing this, something is being saved now in the barzakh, in the meeting place. In this place that we can't point to, but it's really going to be where we are and who we are in forever. That's really the resurrection body, is another name for it. And it's hard to get a handle on, because it's like it's so everything that you can't feel it. It's just saving all that it is, all that's going on. So here's some more about it. For one thing, what did that do? Well, it led me to think about donating food to a food bank, because I had that idea in my head, and I'm saying I'm feeding everybody. Well, wait a minute here. Let's actually send some money in, and I talked to Azerbaijan. We sent a good amount of money to a food bank. But more than that is that in the barzakh, the fertilizing became something more subtle. We have the honor of being bridges in the world. Human beings are bridges in the world. And the way that we use our imaginations, the way that we can focus, and I bet birds do it, I bet other guys do it too, but anyway, we are known for being able to imagine things. Our brains are set up in a certain kind of way that we can kind of think through these in a different way than some animals can. But anyway, we do have that, so we can contribute that to life. So, in feeding, the feeding idea is made like into a subtle energy, I said, or like a concept. It's like pushing it out into the subtle realms, feeding. Even though I was just feeding a plant, okay, that's working with things on a deeper level. Here's more. So why can it become something more subtle? Because we are all aligned in that meeting place. Everything is connected. The scientists say it too. But how do you realize that? How can you think of all those things at once? It's hard for me to think of like 100 different things at once, but thinking of millions and millions of beings and everything, I can't put an address on those things. So it's like challenging me to find that place where I actually am in contact with all of it. It's not going to happen with our brain. Oh yeah, maybe you have an idea. What other part of us would you think could be caressing? I'll use a word that might bring it to mind. Oh, I see somebody is just putting her heart in her hand right here. Yes, it can happen in our hearts. Our hearts extend way beyond what our minds can do. And so in this process of feeding the roses, that can be something where it is opening our hearts, and because our hearts are open, then we are unfolding to all these different realms and levels and all, and making God happy, I have to say, and making, some things circulate that wouldn't be circulating before, besides just signing up for the, to give to the food bank. When one of us realizes it, I got a little bit more here, and I'd be happy to let you talk. One of us are aligned in the meeting place, and when one of us realizes it, the contact there is strengthened. So it's like strengthening. You could think of muscles. If there's muscles in this barzakh, they get strengthened to be able to connect in ways that hadn't been before. This way really happens with people like Jesus. He did incredible things to be able to link people through the way he spoke, but also just his beingness. So here's what it can refer to besides just giving fertilizer to roses. What does that to? Every stitch of a sewing needle done consciously. Every mark with a crayon, paintbrush, pastel. Every time you go through a difficult transaction in selling a home or even talking to somebody that really needs to be talked to as they're buying a home. This, as we become conscious of it and refer it and offer it up, is another way of talking about it. It strengthens this connection between all of us. It's not only on this surface here, and every note a musician plays is played for all. It can be. My musician husband over here. Like I perceived as a young girl cleaning, I told this story to you many times, some of you. I was loving Mother Mary. I thought about Mary as I was cleaning, that this was the surface of Mary. And it sure made cleaning a lot more pleasant. That touch reaches everything.
So when we think about imagination, usually we think about, we're imagining something else. Something at a different time, something at a different place, or we're imagining something at a different realm of existence, like I could imagine the angelic realm and so on. But we're thinking of it as something different from what's here. Well, the mystics say that what they describe as the subtle realms are not at any other places. Everything is right here. They're just different vibrational levels. And it's because our perception, which is usually limited and constricted to a particular band of frequencies, that we only are aware of a certain tiny, tiny slice of the totality that is reality. And so what our human tendency is, and it's a collective tendency, is to kind of lock that in to an unquestioned assumption. I mean, it's just like, well, we don't assume the sky is blue. Of course it's blue. We see that. We don't assume that there could be anything different to the world than what we see, but of course there couldn't be, because if there were, we would certainly see it, wouldn't we? Well, no, we wouldn't, because our senses are limited. So in actuality, the Sufis talk about the true imagination. And the true imagination is what enables us to, number one, perceive, but number two, experience reality with a capital R. So we're not experiencing something someplace else, we're experiencing the true nature of what is right now. So there's an expansion, a tremendous expansion of our world that becomes so much richer. And I've said this many times before, and I really believe this, that everything, every circumstance, every situation, no matter how good, how bad it might seem, is a potential portal, P-O-R-T-A-L, an opening to the sacred. That if we are able to relate to it in a certain way, and as Diane was saying, it could happen through a stitch of someone sewing, it could happen through a word that someone says or hears, it could happen to you hearing the sound of a bird. So there could be the tiniest thread of connection that opens up this much richer way of experiencing. So one of my favorite chapters in the writings, or the message, because these were given orally and written down, of Hazrat Inayat Khan, who brought Sufism to the West in the early 1800s, is a chapter called Spiritual Circulation Through the Veins of Nature. And I just love this. I'm just going to read you some tidbits from this. When one observes keenly the nature of this life of variety, one finds that behind the veil of variety there is only one life, the source and goal of all things. It is this life which may be called the blood of the universe, circulating through the veins of nature. It may be called either substance or spirit. It is something out of which all that is seen and all intelligence is molded and kept alive and in working order. It is this life which we know as intelligence. And then some more from this chapter. Life is intelligence everywhere. And the more one communicates with life, the more one feels that even the rock is not without life, that through it pulses the blood of the universe. And when we look at life from this point of view, we see that there is no place, no object which is not sacred, that even in a rock one may find the source and goal of all things in that particular form. So we've talked about Tawil before, which means seeing the deeper reality beyond the surface experience. And so this is a way of relationship with what we experience even in the physical world, that opens up a much deeper world. It could happen with a rock, a flower, a child, anything. The soul of the whole creation is one. The life behind all these ever-moving phantoms is one. Meditation on this truth and the awakening to it will harmonize the condition of the world. So we look at our world, turn on the TV, look at a newspaper, and it's easy to feel despair, and it's easy to think, oh my God, what can I possibly do? But listen to this sentence again. Meditation on this truth and the awakening to it will harmonize the condition of the world. I remember their book, I can never say his name correctly, Tanya, it was a Buddhist, and a three-part name. But in this,
Dick Not Khan.
yeah, I think it was. And this might have even been someone else that said this, but this beautiful line, he said, I had a cup of tea and the war stopped.
That's even better than watering roses. Just having a cup of tea.
And the rest of this, that meditation on this truth and the awakening to it will harmonize the condition of the world. And when the soul begins to see the truth, it is born again. Born again, you know, we might think, well, we have to, as Jesus said, the resurrection, we're up somewhere after we die. But born again is coming to the true life in the world that we are truly in. And the Sufis say, die before death and resurrect now. We don't have to wait till this physical body falls away to come to that awakening that enables us to experience what the world truly is, when we can establish the proper relationship between our human manifest side and our divine transcendent side. That's one direction, the transcendent or vertical, but the horizontal is establishing that connection with whatever we experience. Because guess what? Everything in the world is also a manifestation of the divine in a unique way. And what transpires in the way that we relate to what we're experiencing is not only revealing to us the deeper nature of what we are experiencing, but in the way that the light circulates in that connection, it's bringing forth something new that's never been before. And we could say that the divine being, Him herself, is enriched and transformed by that way of experiencing. So again, we think, well, what can we do with what's in the world? Imagine what we can do and contribute to what we think of as God or the divine being, that we actually are the very means of the evolution of the divine being.
Does that
So
feel pretty good?
If that doesn't give you a reason to get out of bed in the morning, I'm not sure what.
So we've talked now about the use of the imagination in expanding, instead of constricting, expanding the understanding of who we are and what is our role and how we are connected with everything. Another thing that we often need to look at in our transformation time here is we seem to be going back and forth between constriction and then openness and, and enjoying life, and then back to constriction again. And of course, which one do we like better? Well, we like the going up here. We like the opening. We like to. So our son Dave is a sweetheart that lives on the other side of life. He passed on 33 years ago, last Tuesday, was it? Wednesday, the 3rd of August. That is his Urs, they call it in the Sufi tradition, or the anniversary of his death, and passing to the other side. And I have to say that he has been an amazing contributor and communicator with this side. He's given us many poems that you can read. And I opened up to him on that day. Well, he was actually like, Mom, I could feel him. Like, okay, Mom. And so, okay, I'll take pencil and paper and I'll write down what we're going to say here. So I'm going to read that to you. And I've written it so that you understand it's really both of us. I'm talking and then he's talking. And it is about this thing that I'm calling the alternation between the constriction and the beauty and the release. I push the newness of my being, this is me now, out of its dry husk. I was feeling that as I was listening to Dave. I just felt this wonderful feeling. And I said, born again I rise, propelled by wings which have been lately forgotten. A remembered soul, dewy with blessed Svarna, which is the light of creation. I was feeling myself just full of all this beauty. And so here's Dave talking. He says, let's take it back to the stage of entrapment. I thought, oh great, now we're going. I thought, oh, okay. He said, remember what that's like, earmark it. No exit, says the sign. Waiting for Godot. Loneliness in the midst of glory. And so here I'm interrupting because I'm ready to go back the other way. And I say, and now I come again dancing into heavenly arms. Silently I rise, plumping up tissues, soaking up essences which have longed to be owned again. And then Dave says, Mom, could you be a navigator of this passage from one side to the other? Admitting your full humanness, and describing the stark loneliness on one hand, and blossoming a full beinghood as you rise anew into waiting arms, your own literal family. Him on the other side, he's saying, we wait to cheer you past this chasm into our arms. Boy, I have a real advantage having all this love on the other side. Pulling. And he goes on. He said, held in sweet embrace so rare, the two sides of life are navigable by every being. But in this case, you can describe the steps, since you experience them from the point of view of the incarnate soul. He's giving me an assignment. An assignment. To mark the steps from one to the other, he's saying.
Which is what we're doing in this class.
Yeah, well, here we are. We can, it involves him too. Let's see. We can cheer you on from here. Let's see. Confident in your awakening again and again. So what is he saying to me? He's saying, this is part of it, Mom. You have to go back to sleep again. You have to get involved and enmeshed and messed up, and then back to the other side, and you'll be able to go enough times that you can do some writing about it, do some explaining and teaching about it. I'm going, oh, okay, I guess this is what I'm going to be in for. And then he says, your heart can do it, Mom. Your unique heart. Each one of us has a unique heart to be able to do it in your way. Remember, you have super saturated beingness around all the time. I've learned some things. Yet you must forget. And then remember again. And how sweet the remembering. That's where I cry every time. Yes, he says, it's the turn. This is a phrase in Sufis they call the spinning that the dervishes do, the turn. And it is about that. About being in life and then turning again towards the center and then being in life again and keeping that going. He says, navigate for us all, sweet birther. So that was my story, and that is a challenge for all of you. That when you're in the muck again, remember that is what human beings are about, especially the ones that are on a spiritual path, because we are learning what to do with that. What do we do with this forlorn being? Well, being in the life, in the body, and in the soul of this forlorn being, that's a real advantage. We're not just looking at somebody else over there and helping them how we can. We're in the middle of a being that's having a hard time. Well, most of us feel like, I'm not in spiritual development for doing this. I want to be on the other side, looking down and just enjoying all the glory and everything like that. I'm telling you, this is a very noble job, and I think really we're all in it for that. I think that's what we're all here for. I don't really know anybody that goes, meditates, and now they're just at this wonderful place and they don't have troubles anymore. That's not how it is.
So to me, I think if I had to pick one scripture, I'd pick the Bhagavad Gita. And if you're not familiar with it, the Bhagavad Gita begins, in fact the whole story is told on a battlefield. Krishna, who's the incarnation of God, is talking to his disciple Arjuna, and Krishna is driving Arjuna's chariot, and at the start they're on a battlefield. They're lined up on one side and there's thousands of people in the armies on the other side, and Arjuna is saying to Krishna, I've got relatives over there, why do I have to fight and whatever, and the whole thing is Krishna talking about dharma, spiritual purpose. And to me it's the most amazing thing, because it's spirituality. Talk about life as your teacher and the nuts and bolts of spirituality in the most difficult situation possible. So part of my story is, as some of you know, back in 2002, I had a major heart attack. I mean, I could have just not been out of the hospital alive. And I'm doing really well now. But even when I was in the hospital, even when I was in ICU, a realization came to me, which sounds really strange, and it sounds very Pollyannish, but I'll try to give you a sense of it, and it was that everything is the good stuff. Now that does not mean that whatever is going on in the world is the good stuff. Of course not. There's horrible things going on in the world. But Hazrat Khan has something he talks about called the smiling forehead. And it's an attitude towards life that in spite of whatever conditions we find ourselves in, underneath all that there's an understanding certainty and state of beingness that all is okay. Everything is okay. That and something I like to talk about is something I call a principle called the optimization of light. And I believe that the nature of light, and not just physical light, light in all of its subtle forms, undergoes its own evolution. And it's continually undergoing an evolution to have a greater and greater capacity of how much light can be expressed in existence. And to me, the spiritual circulation through the veins of nature, what circulates through the veins of nature? Light. And what are we? We're beings of light. We're made of light. And how do we interact? We interact through light, through different vibrations of light, some of which are now in the form of matter. But it's all the awakening of divinity to itself that can only take place through the experiences, all the experiences, not just the ones we like. All the experiences of our life are grist for the mill for the divine being. But the way that we relate to those either, as Diane was mentioning, can bring about a state of more constriction, a dimming of the light, or it can be like what a laser does. A laser focuses light in a very pure frequency and enables something to come through that couldn't come through without that focalization. So each of us is a particular way of, I'll make up a word, spectruming light. Of light not only coming through us, but relating to the light that comes through everything else, and then what transpires from that connection of light. It's unique coloring that can only happen through us. Each of you has got your unique way of coloring of what emerges through your way of being in the world. So I like to think of that these experiences that are the challenging ones, as Diane said, that can pull us back, and of course we get caught up because we're human. But over time, hopefully we get better at remembering more and more easily and realizing ways that we can free ourselves from the projections that we've caught ourselves up in. We create our own mental prison in our way of relating to circumstances. And this quote that I've used from a Sufi from hundreds of years ago, oh man, now I'd say, oh man, oh woman, but if you knew that you are free, it's your thought of captivity that keeps you in chains. The reality of who we are can never be bound. But because we are the way of the divine being, getting to know him herself, that can't happen if everything was just all easy and wonderful and beautiful. It has to happen through like the setting of the Bhagavad Gita, sometimes on the battlefield of life. I was in India in, I think it was 1972, excuse me, and I was traveling with an acharya, a yogi monk, and this is when Pakistan and India were at war, and there was a threat of shelling was going to come into New Delhi from Pakistan and vice versa, and this person I was traveling with was just so happy, and people were saying to him, Dada is what they call him, Dadaji, how can you be so happy? This terrible war is going on. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, war is the calling card of God. When there's war, everybody remembers God. Sometimes it takes a crisis for us to wake up and remember who we are. And the world is certainly undergoing a state of crisis right now, and it's really calling on people to come to their higher nature, to find ways of relating to circumstances and especially to other people, to discover the power of what can take place through the connectedness of us with each other, that we are all connected, as Diane mentioned early in this class, at a very deep level with everything else. We can't take it all in our head. We can experience that feeling in our heart, but we can become capable of what we put out into that connection and what we receive from it that helps to bring about a change in the world. So let me read you just a few more sentences from what Hazrat Khan said about spiritual circulation through the veins of nature. Prophets and great mystics have come to the world from time to time as the physician comes to help the patient whose health is disordered. And when the great ones have come, they have brought a new life to the world, given to the organism of the universe to help it run smoothly. The Sufis have always existed as mystics, and their lives have been devoted to meditation and spiritual practices. What have they learned from these meditations? They have learned the essence of everything, the oneness or unity. And it is by thinking about unity, by realizing it, and by living it, that the human fulfills the purpose of their life.
So I'm going to summarize a little bit. First of all, listen to it again if you can. However, there are 3 points that I'd like to make. One of them being, these are the different elements that I would recommend to you. One is presence. And in what Don was just saying, I see that very much, that he was working with being present to who you are and being present to what it is that we bring. Remembering, is a good way of thinking about it, being present. And the next one was imagination. So that I started out with the imagination and how you could see things differently and wider when you give fertilizer to the roses and play music, about how that is connecting you to everything. It's like widening. Can you feel that, how it's widening your consciousness to think of all the ways that this is distributed, what little thing that you might do? So that's imagination. And then compassion. In David's and my story, in your compassion for your own being, when you are in that state of confusion and difficulty and misery, especially we go, wow, I was so happy before, and I'm doing all these practices and everything, and here I am again, having compassion for that being. So these 3 will take you a long way, these 3 ideas. I was hoping that we might have comments of some people right now that are not being taped.
So let's do a meditation. So close your eyes and let yourself become very present, not just to the place that you're in right now, whether it's in the room with us live or those of you that are listening to this recording on YouTube later, wherever you are, become present to more than just your environment. Can you become present to yourself? What does that mean? Well, to start with, just become present to your physical self, to your body. To the input from your senses, to the temperature in the room, to the air currents, to the feeling of the chair that you're sitting on or whatever you're sitting on, your feet on the floor, the sounds that may be present. Now give yourself a license to expand the scope of your awareness. And realize that you are a being that exists far beyond the confines of your physical body. And even far beyond the confines of the present moment in time and space where you are located. So even if you aren't sure how to go about perceiving this, just take it as an assumption that every breath that you take goes through all of the levels of vibration on which you exist, all the subtle levels, beyond the physical. And you have an existence that was there before you incarnated into this life. And you have an existence that continues after you're no longer physically present in the world. And Hazrat Inayat Khan uses this beautiful metaphor that I've described many times before, of each of our souls being like a ray that comes from the divine central sun. And each ray that represents our soul goes through all the vibrational levels, all the subtle realms, all the way down to the physical. And we are the entire ray. We're not just the part that we're usually aware of at this end in the world. And usually we think of the purpose of spirituality being the aspect of this ray, which is our notion of ourself in life, transforming that into something else and going back to where we came from, to the one, to the source. But the Sufis say that the purpose of life is the awakening of divinity in life. So we are human divine beings. Each of us is a unique manifestation and expression of divinity throughout all the realms on which we exist. And not only that, each of us embodies a unique way of relating to all that we experience, whether it's in the world or whether it's in inner experiences in meditation. And when we're really present in those experiences, something opens, something is revealed that has never been there before. So revelation is not just a discovery of something that's already been there. Revelation is something that's new, not just to what we think of as our human self, but something that's new to what we think of as the divine. It's never been before and could never have been except for our unique way of relating to the divine and the expressions of the divine in existence. So let yourself think about a circumstance in your life right now, perhaps a challenging one that you're dealing with. And it's probably not too hard to find one where you think, well, if I didn't have to deal with this, it sure would be easier to meditate. Or I sure would like to meditate and just forget about this and go to some state of light and bliss. But instead, realize that this circumstance is the very means of the divine and your side of the divine, the human part of the divine, discovering something that's never been before, opening up a new expression of light that not only becomes available to you, but as we talked about earlier in this class, it is a gift to everything in existence. It becomes available to everything in existence. So we can become the birthers, the sowers of seeds of wisdom in the new creation that the Sufis say takes place at every instant, sowing the seeds of unborn wisdom that germinate through experiences in the reality in which we exist. That's the soil that those seeds can blossom in. And we water those seeds, we fertilize those seeds, we give them light through our very way of being. Think about that. Each of us has a way of providing an essential nutrient, so to speak, of seeds of wisdom that can bring about revelation that can only take place through that, through us. Each of us is a unique way. You could say each of us is a unique gardener or a unique farmer. And if that's not wonderful enough, imagine that the way that we relate to other beings, other manifestations, whether animate or inanimate in the world, the light that we receive from those, that light germinates seeds of wisdom latent in our own being that can only take place through what is added through that circulation. So we constantly have the potential of being givers and sowers of seeds of wisdom. We constantly have the potential of being the garden in which other seeds of wisdom can blossom that require input from other manifestations of the divine being. Can't just take place through what we have in ourselves or through our own inner experiences. So these are probably thoughts too big to hold in the mind, so don't try to hold them there. Can you just experience this wonderful, transpiring light in every direction, to and from manifestation and to and from the transcendent. And the ever-increasing beautification of the divine being in life. Our journey of awakening is not something solely for our own benefit, but is a gift to all of existence, and is a gift to the divine being. So just take a few moments and experience this. There's a beautiful little song that kind of sums this up. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share in this sweet